Chicago. The year is 1900. From a distance, the city looks like a monument to American industry. Railroads stretch in every direction. Factories line the river. Smoke rises above the skyline. But if you travel a few miles south of downtown, you reach a place most visitors never forget: the Union Stockyards. Here, thousands of animals arrive every single day. Cattle, pigs, sheep. They come by train from farms across the American Midwest. But they do not leave alive. Inside massive slaughterhouses, entire armies of workers move with mechanical precision. Knives flash, machines grind, conveyor chains carry carcasses across the factory floor. The smell of blood and smoke hangs over the entire district, and by the year 1900, Chicago has become the largest meat processing center on earth. Chicago did not begin as the center of the global meat industry. In the early 1800s, it was only a modest trading town on the edge of the American frontier. But its location would change everything. The city sits between the vast agricultural lands of the Midwest and the rapidly growing cities of the eastern United States. As railroads expanded across the country in the mid-19th century, Chicago suddenly became the perfect crossroads for transporting livestock. Cattle from Texas and Kansas could be driven north along cattle trails and loaded onto trains. Pigs from Iowa and Illinois farms arrived in massive numbers. Sheep from the Great Plains followed the same routes. To handle this enormous flow of animals, a massive industrial complex was built in 1865, the Union Stockyards. The facility quickly became one of the largest livestock markets in the world. Dozens of rail lines connected directly to the yards. Train after train arrived, carrying animals packed tightly into rail cars. When the doors opened, waves of cattle, pigs, and sheep were guided into endless rows of wooden pens stretching across nearly a square mile. The noise was overwhelming. Thousands of animals moving, bellowing, and stomping through muddy ground. Workers rushed between pens counting livestock and directing shipments to different slaughterhouses nearby. But the stockyards were only the beginning of the system. Once the animals arrived, they entered a massive industrial network designed to process them faster and more efficiently than anywhere else on Earth. And as that system expanded, Chicago would soon become the undisputed meat capital of the world. Every morning before sunrise, thousands of workers move toward the massive buildings of the stockyards. They arrive from crowded immigrant neighborhoods surrounding the district, small wooden houses and cramped apartments where entire families often share only a few rooms. Many of the workers are recent arrivals to America: Polish laborers, Lithuanian and Czech immigrants, Irish families who settled in Chicago decades earlier. Some speak little English, but inside the slaughterhouses, language matters less than speed. The work begins early and rarely slows down. Men stand shoulder to shoulder along long processing lines, each responsible for a single task, repeated hundreds, sometimes thousands of times during a shift. One worker stuns the animal, another cuts the throat, another removes the hide, another splits the carcass. The system demands constant motion. If one worker slows down, the entire line behind him begins to stall. The floors are often wet and slippery. The air is thick with steam, heat, and the metallic smell of blood. Knives must be sharp. Movements must be precise, because one mistake can mean serious injury. Yet despite the danger and exhaustion, workers continue coming every day. For many immigrant families in Chicago, these brutal factory jobs are one of the few ways to survive in the rapidly growing industrial city. Inside the slaughterhouses of Chicago's Union Stockyards, the atmosphere is intense and overwhelming from the moment you step through the doors. Long corridors guide the animals forward, slowly moving them toward the killing floors. Workers stand at their assigned positions, each responsible for one specific task in a process designed for speed and efficiency. Overhead, heavy iron chains move constantly along mechanical tracks. Carcasses are lifted into the air and carried from station to station as workers cut, trim, and prepare the meat. Knives flash under the dim industrial lights, and the sound of metal tools echoes across the massive rooms. Steam rises from large vats where fat is rendered and bones are boiled down for other products. The floors are wet and slippery, covered with a mixture of water, blood, and sawdust used to absorb the mess. The noise never stops. Machines clatter, workers shout instructions to one another, animals move nervously through narrow chutes. And above everything else hangs the powerful smell of the industry itself, a heavy mix of blood, smoke, and boiling fat that spreads far beyond the walls of the buildings and across the entire Stockyards district. What makes Chicago's slaughterhouses truly revolutionary is not only their size, but their incredible speed. Inside the massive packing houses, work moves with mechanical precision. Animals are guided through long corridors and lifted onto overhead rail systems. From that moment forward, the process rarely stops. Carcasses move along chains suspended from the ceiling, passing from one station to the next. At each point, a worker performs a single task. One cuts the throat, another removes the hide, another separates the organs, another trims the meat. Each movement takes only seconds. Then the carcass continues down the line. This method transforms the slaughterhouse into something resembling an early industrial assembly system. Instead of one butcher doing every step, dozens of workers each specialize in one action, repeating it hundreds of times every shift. The result is astonishing efficiency. Hundreds of animals can be processed every hour, thousands every day. And because nothing is wasted, the factories use nearly every part of the animal. Meat goes to markets. Hides become leather. Fat becomes lard and soap. And bones are processed into fertilizer. The entire system moves with relentless momentum, a massive industrial machine that rarely slows down. By the year 1900, the scale of Chicago's meat industry is almost impossible to imagine. The Union Stockyards cover hundreds of acres on the south side of the city. Endless rows of wooden pens stretch across the landscape, filled with cattle, pigs, and sheep arriving from farms across the Midwest. Every day, long trains roll into Chicago, carrying thousands of animals. Railway tracks run directly into the stockyards, allowing livestock to be unloaded and moved quickly into holding pens before entering the slaughterhouses. Inside the massive packing plants, production moves with relentless speed. Hundreds of workers stand along processing lines. Animals move through the system step by step, each station performing a specific task. Major companies like Armour and Company and Swift and Company operate enormous facilities capable of processing thousands of animals in a single day. Refrigerated rail cars wait outside the factories. Once the meat is prepared and packed, it is loaded immediately onto trains bound for cities across the United States. Within hours, Chicago meat begins traveling hundreds or even thousands of miles to markets across the country. At this scale, the industry no longer looks like a collection of factories. It looks like a vast industrial machine, one that feeds an entire nation. Behind the enormous productivity of Chicago's meatpacking industry lies a harsh human reality. Inside the slaughterhouses, the work is dangerous and exhausting. Workers stand for long hours on wet, slippery floors covered with blood, grease, and animal waste. The pace is relentless. Animals move along the processing lines quickly, and every worker must keep up with the rhythm of the machines. Sharp knives flash constantly. Heavy hooks swing from overhead chains. Steam fills the air from boiling vats used to process fat and bones. One small mistake can lead to serious injury. Workers cut their hands, lose fingers, or suffer crushed limbs from heavy machinery. Medical care is limited, and injured workers are often replaced quickly by others waiting for work. Most employees are immigrants who arrived in Chicago hoping for a better life. Many do not speak English fluently and accept the difficult conditions because the job offers steady pay. Entire families depend on these wages. Parents work long shifts, while children sometimes find small jobs nearby in factories or warehouses. Despite the danger and exhaustion, thousands continue working in the stockyards every day. Because for many immigrant families, even the harshest industrial job still represents a chance to survive and build a future in America. By the turn of the 20th century, Chicago has become something extraordinary. What once began as a regional livestock market has transformed into the largest meat processing center in the world. Every day, enormous trains arrive from across the American Midwest carrying cattle, pigs, and sheep raised on distant farms and ranches. The rail lines feeding the Union stockyards stretch across thousands of miles, connecting Chicago to the agricultural heartland of the United States. When those trains arrive, the animals are moved into vast holding pens that cover acres of land. From there, they enter the enormous slaughterhouses where the industrial process begins. Inside the factories, the system operates with relentless efficiency. Animals move through carefully organized production lines. Workers at each station perform a specific task. Within minutes, livestock is transformed into packaged meat, ready to be shipped across the country. Refrigerated rail cars make it possible to transport fresh meat over long distances. Suddenly, cities thousands of miles away can receive Chicago beef and pork within days. Restaurants in New York, markets in Boston, railroad towns across the western frontier all depend on the meat processed in Chicago. The city becomes known not only as an industrial giant, but as the place that feeds a rapidly growing nation. But this dominance comes with a cost. The constant slaughter, the endless noise of machinery, and the thick smell of smoke and livestock become permanent features of the neighborhoods surrounding the stockyards. For many residents, the industry provides jobs and opportunity. For others, it turns the southern districts of Chicago into one of the harshest industrial environments in America. Yet despite the conditions, the system continues expanding. Because by 1900, Chicago is no longer just processing meat. It is supplying food to a nation. Standing inside the stockyards around the year 1900 feels less like visiting a workplace and more like witnessing an enormous industrial machine in motion. From the moment livestock trains arrive at the yards, every step of the process is organized with relentless precision. Cattle and pigs are unloaded from rail cars and moved through a maze of wooden pens stretching across dozens of acres. Workers guide the animals through narrow corridors toward the processing buildings where the real machinery of the industry begins. Inside the slaughterhouses, the pace is astonishing. Chains hang from the ceilings, carrying carcasses along overhead tracks that move slowly through the factory floor. Each worker stands at a specific station, repeating a single task again and again. One cuts, another lifts, another removes hides, another trims meat, another prepares parts for packing. Thousands of movements happen every hour. The system is designed for speed. Animals enter at one end of the building, and within minutes, their meat, hides, bones, and fat are already moving toward separate departments for processing. Nothing is wasted. Fat becomes soap and cooking oil. Hides become leather. Bones are ground into fertilizer. Even scraps are processed into industrial products. Outside the buildings, rail cars wait along the tracks. Refrigerated freight cars are packed with meat destined for distant cities. Within days, beef processed in Chicago will appear in butcher shops hundreds or even thousands of miles away. The entire operation moves continuously, day after day, night after night. An industrial system so powerful that it transformed Chicago into the meat processing capital of the world. By the early years of the 20th century, Chicago's meatpacking industry has transformed the city into something few places in the world can match. Every day, enormous numbers of animals arrive by rail from across the American Midwest. Within hours, they move through the vast network of pens, slaughterhouses, and processing plants that dominate the southern edge of the city. From these factories, meat is shipped to markets across the entire United States. Refrigerated rail cars carry Chicago beef and pork to New York, Boston, and even the West Coast. What was once a regional industry has become a national supply system. The Union Stockyards turned Chicago into the undisputed center of the global meat trade. For decades, the rhythm of trains, factory whistles, and processing lines will define this part of the city. The industry feeds millions of people, builds powerful corporations, and shapes the identity of Chicago itself. A city where industrial speed, relentless labor, and massive production come together to create one of the most influential food systems in modern history. What you've just seen is a reconstruction of Chicago around 1900 during the height of the Union Stockyards and the meatpacking industry. The streets, factories, and working environments were recreated using AI reconstruction technology to visualize how this industrial district looked during one of the most intense periods in the city's history.